Yeah, it was a pretty surreal moment. I remember seeing a flash where the rocket landed, but I don't remember much after that. I remember perhaps being thrown and then sort of coming to and looking at my colleague and saying, what do we do next?
G'day LinkedIn. I just love meeting all sorts of different people here, watching their posts and seeing a bit of their story. And one such post that caught my attention recently was David Healey. He's a former AFP member who has now taken the tough circumstances that he endured in his 15-year career there and turned that precisely into a benefit to serve other people, mainly representing other first responders now across all fireys, paramedics and police, of course, with their compensation claims. Now, Dave, we'll get into this in a moment, but first of all, as the rain starts here in Freshwater, you're in Canberra. Beautiful day down there.
Hi, Evan. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Beautiful day down here in Canberra.
Yeah, so David, tell us, you're in the AFP for 15 years. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are understanding more and more the price that our frontline first responders are paying. I see on your profile there as well that you're in the Army. But tell us, you're with the Federal Police for a number of years there.
Yes, that's correct, Evan. I was in the AFP for 15 years in various roles, from general duties policing into the tactical response of the operational response group, as a colloquial sort of shield holder, and then deployed to Afghanistan and the Solomon Islands. In Afghanistan, I was injured by a rocket attack in 2011, and I think that commenced really the journey and the track for me in terms of making sure that I represented the interests of first responders. So it started off with representing police, and then expanded to representing fireys and ambulance officers and public servants and the like. So it became, I guess, my real focus in how I ran this firm here, and giving a voice to emergency service workers that wouldn't necessarily have one, given that their sort of mantra was to shut up and put up. So I guess that was my calling.
David, you said a rocket attack in Afghanistan. Were you there for the AFP or in a role with the Army at that point? Or can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. The rocket attack was in Tarankout in 2011. I was deployed in my capacity as Australian Federal Police Officer, Federal Agent, and also used in my capacity as a lawyer and a reservist in the Australian Army. At that point, I was a captain working in a cell in Tarankout. When the rocket attack came, I was down at the Provincial Training Centre doing what we called bats and hides on Afghan police, which is essentially fingerprinting and iris scanning, and the alarms went off. One rocket went over the top of us and hit about 400 metres away, and then there was a bit of a gap, and then myself and another colleague walked out of the training centre and into open ground, and the rocket hit for about 30 metres away, and that was that. And that was 2 days before coming home. So I was placed into Tarankout Base Hospital and put on a drip and assessed for all sorts of injuries.
David, 30 metres away, I cannot imagine what that would be like. Do you remember it clearly, that moment as it hit? What impact did it have on your body? I mean, it must have been an extraordinary moment to think, has that really just happened?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Yeah, it was a pretty surreal moment. I remember seeing a flash where the rocket landed, but I don't remember much after that. I remember perhaps being thrown and then sort of coming to and looking at my colleague and saying, what do we do next? So it was quite a surreal moment. It was pretty much like it wasn't happening, and I think that's probably how I sort of survived it, I guess. We just sort of looked at each other and got on with it. It was a miracle, I think, in terms of not being hit by anything. But at the time, there was a lot of Australians getting killed in action, and we were inside the wire, so it was putting that into context, it was something that really I didn't give much thought to until later on, when I realised how much it had affected me. But we were going to ramp ceremonies on a weekly basis at that point, and farewelling brave Australian soldiers that were being killed in action. So my experience paled into insignificance compared to those brave soldiers, but nevertheless it was a pretty harrowing experience. And being transported then to Tarankout Base Hospital, where I was put on a drip and given morphine, and all sorts of tests were conducted. And I mean, it was fortunate I was flying out a couple of days later, but I do distinctly remember being in a hotel in Dubai, and the whole room just gave way, and the floor gave way essentially, and I had pretty bad vertigo and post-blast concussion and spinal issues and things like that. But that was it was the entree for what would be the main course in terms of me becoming a principal in my own firm, and defending those people that went through some harrowing experiences like I had.
Other people might well justifiably have thrown in the towel and gone on to do something else. You're still working in this space, helping other first responders. Tell us, that there must have been a lengthy process for yourself being discharged. Where did your representation of other colleagues start? Was it a part of your journey of being discharged that you saw the opportunity to help others, or were you already sort of acting in that space representing others? And because this is a fascinating part of your own personal experience, enables you to do something for other people so much more effectively.
I kind of fell into it. So I was already a lawyer in the AFP and a small member when I came back from Afghanistan, and I was also a reservist captain in the Australian Army Legal Corps. So at that point I had a secondary employment application in with the AFP, which was approved for me to run a small firm. And at that stage I was looking after AFPA, so Australian Federal Police Association members who were finding themselves up against it in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. It was at that point that I was starting to get make some ground for members, and get some victories in terms of their fight against Comcare to get injuries accepted and so forth. And that was around 2016, and it was at that point that I got an ultimatum from the AFP, where they said I either be a small police member in the AFP or a lawyer representing members outside the AFP, and to make my choice. So they rescinded my secondary employment, and then I found myself literally working out of a small room in my house, representing at that point 4 or 5 AFP members, and I had literally no income.
What did you feel at any point, this sort of the way it was playing out, that you thought, oh, maybe I will just take a path of having, continuing with a regular income and not take this risk?
No, not really. I think at that stage in my career in the AFP, I mean, I was pretty broken, had post-traumatic stress disorder and major depressive disorder, and some spinal injuries and vertigo and a few other odds and ends from Afghanistan. So, but coupled with that was also the fact that I had 4 alive members of the AFP in my care as a lawyer, and I was not prepared to let them go by remaining in the AFP. So for me, it wasn't a choice per se. The choice was an ethical one, and that was remaining, with those AFP members. And that's been, I guess, the way I've practiced, is that I've always been, I've always strongly had the back of, every client that I have, to the greatest extent possible. So that was the greatest learning outcome for me. I mean, I was fortunate that I was in the Australian Army at the time, so I had, as a reservist, so I had that to fall back on a little bit, and I'm very, very grateful to the Australian Army. They stood beside me the entire time, to the point now I'm a Lieutenant Colonel and representing the needs of members in the Australian Defence Force.
We hear all the time in business this idea of having a niche focus and being able to grow a business and a practice effectively if we just focus on serving a few clients. Now, is that exclusively what your firm does now? Is representing the needs of first responders?
Yes, I guess it is exclusively what I do, is that I represent first responders. It has expanded to include public servants in terms of representing those as well. And it's become Australia-wide, so it's, we've got police in every state and territory that are, Australian Federal Police, that is. I don't do states so much, but I look after sort of ACT Ambulance, ACT Fire Brigade and ACT Policing and Australian Federal Police. In terms of how I practice, I think it's a fused profession here in the ACT, so we're all admitted as barristers and solicitors, but I've got to be clear that I haven't done the bar exams or done a practice course, so my predominant role is as a principal solicitor of my own firm. And I've done that, I did want to go to the bar, but the reason I didn't go to the bar and become a barrister practicing was because I wanted to be at the coalface looking after members. And the only way I can do that is as a principal solicitor here in my own firm.
David, everyone knows we're only just starting to understand more and more the effects of PTSD on frontline responders. What have you noticed in the last couple of years? What are the trends that you're seeing across the country in terms of the numbers, the scale of the problem and how it's being treated by the various, well, in particular the AFP?
It has become a bit of an issue, post-traumatic stress disorder, across all agencies. Not just emergency service workers, but predominantly emergency service workers, but across all agencies. And I think that's because there's probably greater awareness about what causes post-traumatic stress disorder, and therefore people that have it are more willing to come forward. And I think agencies like the Australian Federal Police are a bit more open to accepting members that have post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't that long ago that people that had mental injuries like this within organisations like the AFP were, well, particularly in my circumstance, I felt like I was kept in the dark and not given opportunities and treated like I was a bit of a leper. But, fast forward 10 years or a little bit under 10 years and, PTSD is treated, I guess, almost like any other injury, and that is organisations like the AFP are trying to do their best to get members back into the AFP through rehabilitation processes, understanding that being exposed to traumatic events does have a very grave impact on members. I don't think they always get it right, unfortunately, and that's why I am representing interests of members in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And this is despite the fact that there's presumptive legislation out there for post-traumatic stress disorder and those that suffer from it within the Australian Federal Police. It hasn't really had that much of an impact at the coalface. And in fact, I'm seeing more and more clients or members come to me asking me to navigate the Administrative Appeals Tribunal for them because they feel so aggrieved, unbelieved, and I guess frightened by the sheer scope of what that litigation entails.
David, that must be incredibly rewarding when you're able to represent members and see a great result for them. Is that what keeps you going?
Yes, it is what keeps me going. There's some days I find it pretty hard to get out of bed. We're only all human, and but particularly with what I've been through, I find it really challenging some days to get out of bed. But I think when you've got people relying on you to represent their needs and their interests, and everything's diarised in terms of court appearances, it keeps me on track, it keeps me going, and I feel like I'm really fighting and doing good for people that need it. The people that help us sleep at night and keep us safe. They're the sort of people that are worth representing and are worth taking care of.